Did you see that when the week started, Packers and Eagles was at a near even line? Good to know that even when the Bears do beat the Packers, it's not like it really counts much, anyways. What's up, everybody? Welcome to a playoff edition of Lombardi Time Brews. We're getting ready for Packers versus Eagles. Obviously, the wild card matchup of the 2 seed versus the 7 seed. We got a lot to talk about today. These are two very, very similar teams. And I'm going to follow the same formatting we normally do, injuries, then diving into the Eagles a bit, then really kind of breaking down at least one particular component of the matchup. Today, it's going to be all about the passing game and how these two teams at least have some differences between them. Because as I said, these are weirdly two teams that are built similarly, that perform similarly. So this will be a fascinating matchup. The one thing I will point out too is both the Eagles and Packers kind of enter this game in lulls of different ways. Packers coming off back-to-back losses in their division to the Vikings, and then whatever the hell that week 18 matchup was against the Bears. But then the Eagles, Hurts hasn't played since week 16. They basically rested week 18. So just a number of similarities between these two teams. One area where they are different, though, the injury report. So let's dive right into that. For the Green Bay Packers, they have 2 players on their active roster who have been deemed as out. One is obviously Christian Watson. He's going to be out till like Thanksgiving next year at best. So not at all surprising that he's out. The Packers just haven't moved him to IR yet. Then the other one that's been ruled out is Zane Anderson, who's now missing getting to be kind of concerning amount of time with his concussion. Certainly hope that he's okay. Then in the questionable category of things, there happens to be Evan Williams, Quay Walker, TJ Slayton, and Andre Dillard. However, in spite of the questionable tags for each one of those individuals, most have at least gotten some work in this week. Evan Williams has practiced for 3 straight days, as has Quay Walker. TJ Slayton is coming off of back-to-back days of practice. That'll help in terms of stopping Saquon if he can go. And then Andre Dillard also has gotten into practice this week. So, of those questionable tags, I gotta say, all 4 probably leaning a lot closer to playing than not. And that's really, really good news for the Packers defense. For the Eagles, they're banged up, but really healthy for heading into the postseason. Jalen Hurts, he has officially cleared concussion protocol. He is good to go. A.J. Brown took a day off of practice this week. Good to go. Devonta Smith took today off of practice. Good to go. So in spite of their wide receivers being banged up, having kind of these nagging injuries, they're good to go. Hurts fully back from his concussion. They're healthy. Really, the only notable player on their roster, and someone who wasn't even starting really by the time that he suffers his season-ending injury, Brandon Graham. He finds himself on IR, but this is not like going up against the Lions where there's all these dudes on IR. No, the Eagles are just a remarkably healthy team. So who are they? They are 14-3. They've rattled off wins against the Packers in week 1, Saints, Browns, Giants, Bengals, Jaguars, Cowboys, Commanders, Rams, Ravens, Panthers, Steelers, Cowboys again, and Giants. Then they've got losses against the Falcons by 1 point, the Bucks, and the Commanders in the game that Hurts left with his concussion. I will say, Eagles-Commanders was a close game, and yes, Hurts did leave in that game. They lost to the Falcons by 1 point. Really, the only game this year that the Eagles completely and decisively lost was their matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A couple further schedule highlights here. Their only loss at home was that 1 point loss to the Falcons all the way back in week 2. Plus, they've only allowed 20 points or more in a game 6 times this year. They happen to be 3-3 in those games. As for where those games occurred, they've only given up 20 or more in Philly twice this season, finishing 1-1 in those games. If you technically go look it up, yes, they do have 3 home games where they've given up 20, but one was Brazil against the Packers. So let's take a look at these Philadelphia Eagles and their starting lineup. 1, Jalen Hurts is back. Then 2, you got the 2,000-yard man himself, Saquon Barkley. Wide receivers, you got A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Jahan Dotson there, and he is kind of their, Devonta Smith, he kicks it into the slot, I would say half of his snaps. Jahan Dotson gets the rest of them. Dallas Goedert, he's kind of an up and down year with injuries, but he's there at tight end. He's good to go. Then look at this behemoth of humans there. That offensive line, quite possibly, quite probably, the best offensive line in the NFL. They lost Jason Kelce and didn't even really miss a beat. Cam Jurgens has filled in at center tremendously. We know that Lane Johnson is one of the best tackles in the NFL. Mulata on the other side. Same deal for him, certainly at least above average. Mekhi Becton has found health and consistency, now filling in at guard. It is a very, very big offensive line, and man, do they clear the way for Saquon Barkley. Flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, yes, using that Vic Fangio 3-4 defense. Davis, Carter, again, you're looking at large human beings there along the defensive line, both with game-breaking potential. At linebacker, you got Josh Sweat, probably their best pure pass rusher. Zach Bond having the year of his life at off-ball linebacker as well. PFF's highest graded off-ball linebacker on the year. Then going to the secondary, I hate to say it again, but realistically, incredibly talented secondary with Quinion Mitchell, their first-round pick at corner, having an exceptional rookie year. Cooper. Yeah, Cooper DeJean, my draft crush. The one that so many Packers wanted. Well, yeah, he's playing at Philly and he's lighting it up. Having a ridiculously good year out of the slot for them. Darius Slay still doing Slay things. Maybe not at the level he's always been at, but still one of the best man coverage corners in the league, and realistically still their number one corner with Blankenship and Gardner Johnson then at safety. Still kicking for them. Jake Elliott, punting, Brandon Mann. So, I mean, there you go, right? Like, that's the Eagles starting lineup, and it is a tremendously talented one. So let's dive into some of the numbers about where the Eagles rank. Now, normally I do the last 3 weeks. That doesn't feel pertinent for a playoff matchup, especially considering that for the Eagles, like Jalen Hurts hasn't played in 2.5 weeks. Week 18 wasn't even their starters. They just put in their backups for Week 18. So I'm just going to go whole season numbers here. It feels the most relevant. In terms of defense, they are giving up 113.3 yards per game on the ground. It's right around middle of the pack in the NFL. In terms of attempts, it matches up nicely. Also middle of the pack in rushing against them. In terms of passing, though, they give up 178 yards per game through the air. Fourth best over the last 3. That stat is just last 3. When you take that, though, and put it over the entire year, that's best in the NFL over the full season. In terms of attempts, 10th in attempts against them. Then full season stats, 17.8 points per game they give up. That's second best in the NFL. And then in terms of red zone, 50%, 5th in the NFL. And if you're wondering, have the Green Bay Packers every week gone against like one of the top 10 red zone defenses in the league? Boy, it feels like it, hasn't it? In fact, if overall, this is not red zone specific, but like in terms of overall strength of schedule, as was pointed out in the comments in the last video, Packers are the fifth hardest schedule in the NFL this year. And I got to believe red zone defense, I didn't track all the numbers, but it feels like it closely correlates because holy wow, it's like every single week we're talking about, yep, they're going against a top 5 red zone defense. Philadelphia, no different. Looking at offense for the full season, rushing, they get 179.3 yards per game on the ground. That's second in the NFL. In terms of attempts, they run the ball more than anyone else in the NFL. They're number 1. In terms of passing, only 187.9 passing yards through the air on average. That's 29th in the NFL. Don't let that fool you, though, because in terms of attempts, they're dead last in terms of passing the ball this year. Full season, they get 27.2 points per game. Green Bay, nestled right beneath them at 27.1 points per game. Red zone, they score on 57%, or they get touchdowns on 57% of their red zone drives. It's 13th in the NFL. Green Bay sitting at 59%. By the way, Green Bay since week 8, second in the NFL in terms of red zone. Remember how the first half of the year we talked about how Green Bay sucked in the red zone offensively? They need to figure it out. They did. In terms of turnovers per game, Philadelphia is sitting at a positive 0.6. That's 6th in the NFL. Green Bay sitting at 3rd in terms of a positive 0.7. Then in terms of sacks gotten, Philadelphia gets 2.4 sacks per game. They give up 2.6 sacks per game. Then they also get 6.1 penalties per game called against them. And in terms of yards, only 46.6 penalty yards per game. That is 5th best in the NFL. All of those worries about Philadelphia being so undisciplined last year, yeah, a lot of them are out the window. They are playing a very, very strong, disciplined brand of football, both on the offensive side with Barkley now leading the charge and defensively under Vic Fangio's management. So, okay, let's go into breaking down this matchup. As I said, these are two incredibly similar teams. Numerically, yeah, I already outlined some of the stats, more to come. But it really does go even deeper than that. Even in year-over-year trends, right? So, like, I also would say, too, both of these teams like to manage the game in the same way, right? Green Bay coming off of their lull, Philadelphia coming off of their, like, rest period. I wouldn't be shocked at all if both of these teams come out with plotting, running offenses to start, be it because of rust, be it because of rest, whatever. I would kind of say that. But looking year over year, both of these teams entered the season with very high expectations. Both of them also had a new defensive coordinator, and they both knew that they needed to improve defensively over the product that was on the field last year. Safe to say that both have done that. The Eagles, by basically every single number, are now a top 5 defense. Packers, per some metrics, right there with them, like top 5 in some, certainly top 10 though across the rest of the board. Both teams also signed big-time free agent running backs because they wanted to stabilize what was already pretty good running attacks. Think of the Packers with Aaron Jones. The Eagles historically have gone through a number of running backs, but they're always a good running team. Well, both teams wanted to elevate that this offseason with more of a bell cow, sturdy, magnificent presence for both of these teams. Yeah, I'd say it worked out for both with Jacobs and Barkley. But it's also been interesting to see what the addition of these bell cow running backs has done to the totality of the offense. Both teams have thrown less, a lot less. Hurts down a total of 170 attempts compared to last year. Yes, it's 2 fewer games, but still 170 fewer attempts. Love also 2 games fewer than last year, but he's down 150 attempts. So basically, each team found renewed success in running the football and then starting to throw less, a lot less. It also has effectively placed some kind of cap on both of these offenses, in spite, and I'm not just talking about scoring, I'm talking about their ability to pass the ball has been capped by these lower attempts, and that's in spite of being 2 of the highest scoring teams in the league. So in so many ways, these teams are similar. Where this game may truly come down to, though, is in where they are different, which happens to be in variances in the passing game. For the Eagles offense, expect fully Carrington Valentine, boundary version of Keyshawn Nixon, to be tested. Certainly more than they have throughout basically any time this year. Jalen Hurts is one of the quarterbacks in the NFL who likes to work the outside numbers more than most. And with A.J. Brown almost exclusively on the boundary, with Devonta Smith taking only half of the slot snaps, it's no question as to why. You target them, right? And they're both very boundary-esque receivers. So it's no shock that he does go there. But this is one place where they're different. Hurts in total targets the middle of the field on only 35% of his throws. Love a full 8% higher than that at 43%. Just to give you an idea of scale, one of the league leaders in that regards, and someone that the Packers have been victimized by in the middle of the field, would be Jared Goff, who throws over the middle of the field at a nearly 50% clip. Hurts again only at 35%. This is one thing that actually plays into a Packers' strength. Packers don't want teams to throw the ball over the middle. Even if Evan Williams and Quay Walker return, Green Bay's Achilles heel defensively has been the middle of the field and that layer between linebacker and safety, right? We've seen it again and again. That is their Achilles heel. To go against a team that doesn't necessarily want to pepper that area of the field with targets, ultimately is a break for Green Bay. Another difference here would be their prevalence for throwing it deep. When you look at throws traveling more than 10 yards, okay, not so different. Hurts at 30%, Love 32%. But when you actually just narrow that down to throws traveling more than 20 yards in the air, then you begin to see a difference. The Packers have proven that they can be an explosive team. The Eagles just don't try to be that hard of a deep throwing team. For Love, 16% of his total throws travel over 20 yards in the air. For Hurts, only 10%. And I know that doesn't sound like a huge difference, but when you look at throwing over 20 yards, 6% is actually a really big swing in terms of a number of attempts. When looked at more with a magnifying glass, Love on those throws is 27 of 69 for a 39% completion, 978 yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 picks. Hurts, only 15 of 37, a very similar 40% completion, but only 528 yards on these deep throws, 7 touchdowns, 2 picks. Again, it's not that they can't, it's that they don't. Another huge difference here in terms of passing games, as Doug Farrar points out for Athlon Sports, how these successful quarterbacks are getting their production against different types of defenses. Jalen Hurts is the number 1 quarterback in the league against man coverage this year with a QB rating of 130.8. On the flip side of the ball, the Eagles are also the best man defense in the league, allowing only a QB rating of 58.5 against them when they're in man coverage. And Vic Fangio has been the master in the NFL at zone coverage forever. We had Joe Barry for years, who's a disciple of Vic Fangio. Even though it didn't always look the same, we know the games with zone. Vic Fangio is the father of it all. And yet this year, he's leaning into man coverage more than he has in forever. And in large part, it's because of his personnel. He's got a great man coverage corner in Slay. He's got Mitchell on the other side. And Cooper DeJean, who's proven to be one of the best man coverage slots already in the NFL, as well as one of the best run defense slots in the NFL. They are legitimately, by the numbers, the best man defense offense and defense in the league. Love, though, most of his success has come against zone, because against man, he's got only a 69.5 QB rating. Against zone, Love is consistently top 3 in EPA. Okay, so there's a difference in passing attacks. So what to expect? First, I fully expect, like I said earlier, both teams going to try to run the ball, establish the ground game, plod. We know that. With Green Bay, though, I hope that that's not the case. When passing the ball in this game for Green Bay, I do not want to hear any crap after the game about they ran way more man than we expected, because we heard that after the Minnesota game, when it was clear as day per the numbers that Brian Flores would try to run man against the Packers. Well, and they were taken aback by it, and they weren't successful, right? I certainly don't want to hear that in this game going against this defense with what this coordinator is doing this year. Philadelphia will absolutely play more man and force the Packers wide receivers to have to beat them, which is that much taller of an order without Christian Watson on the field. Green Bay needs to have man-breaker routes ready to go from the get-go, be it covered by Dobbs, Wicks, who's still so good at getting separation, and his hands are getting more reliable, or even Luke Musgrave running up the seam. Probably going to be a combo of all. But the other thing that I want to see from this Packers offense, besides tempo, rhythm, more first half passing, all of the things that I openly weep about on watch parties every single week, is more play action. Jordan Love legitimately is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL when utilizing play action. In fact, he's second in QBR and third in EPA per dropback when using play action per Peter Bukowski. And while Philadelphia, in their man coverage schemes, they attempt to use hyper-aggressive linebacker play. So the key to dismantling all of that man coverage for Philly may have to come in the form of play action. Even though we haven't seen the Packers crush man coverage with it this year like they did last year, I still think it's a way that you got to call the plays. And then the last thing that I want to see the Packers do is something they experienced success with in week 1 per Wendell Ferreira. And that's when he noted that the Packers had a lot of success against Philly when in trips formation, something the Packers like to roll out anyway. Washington, on a much more recent example, was able, especially when Philly kicked it into man, to replicate that success in week 16. So if I'm Green Bay, I want to storm out of the gate. I do not want to follow my typical pattern of run in half 1, and then have to chuck it to catch up in half 2. I want to see them storm out of the gate with play actions, RPOs, tempo, even against one of the best secondaries in the league. Maybe that spells doom, but I do think it gives you a better chance here. Use Philadelphia's potential weaknesses, even though they haven't shown them much, but use it potentially against them and do it quickly. A key for Green Bay that I do believe is building a big enough lead to where you need to force Philadelphia into an offense that they've shown that they just don't want to run. If this gets into just a pure battle of the trenches where Barkley can run it 47 times, he's probably going to run, even though the Packers may contain Barkley pretty well because their run defense is now really good. That's probably still a recipe where Philadelphia runs their way into the division matchup. I think you need to force Philadelphia into an offense that they don't want to run, which is having to force Hurts to actually sling it and have to go to their own up-tempo offense. But I think to get there, Green Bay is going to have to run their own. So, Green Bay has not beaten the top seeds in the NFC this year. Many words have been printed about that thus far. But they've been able to hang with them. There is no denying that. And that means that on any given Sunday, the pathways to victory certainly exist. In order to beat Philadelphia in their house, though, Green Bay is probably going to have to fire on all cylinders. And in my opinion, quickly, in order to repeat a wild card road win like they did last year. They can. It just remains to be seen whether they will. Thank you so much for joining me here on Lombardi Time Brews. Join us on Sunday for the watch party. I don't want to put this in the universe, but hey, it might be the last watch party depending on how this game goes. If they lose, everyone knows, ending this season. So do join us. No matter what happens, we'll make it a good time. Thank you, everyone, for joining me here at Lombardi Time Brews, both today and over the last 3 years. I hope you have a great weekend. And as always, go Pack Go.